Far too often we see team seasons derailed by injuries, and that was the case this season with the Orlando Magic. They have a lot of talent, but when not one, but two all-star caliber players deal with oblique injuries that sideline them for months, and then you have arguably your third best player miss basically the second half of the season and have to undergo knee surgery, it's just not a recipe for success yet. Still ended up as the 7th seed, won in the play-in tournament, and then lost to the Celtics in 5 games, but still put up a fight for most of that series. Clearly, Orlando has something to build on, something to build with, but they do still have plenty of questions that need answering. They do finally, hopefully finally, they need to add shooting. They've tried, but it hasn't solved the issue that has been a lack of spacing around their stars. So how can they address that? They can address it in the draft. They can address it via trade, maybe even in free agency. We'll see how they do it. But one thing is for certain, Orlando will be adding some shooting this offseason. But they do have stars. They have players to build around. Paulo Beno and Franz Wagner at the center of it. And then other pieces that may or may not pan out still. Jaylen Suggs, I think, is probably the guy that we're most confident in, being a really good player because he already is one. But then there's still some other younger guys that we're still trying to figure that out. Before we talk about them and break down the Magic, I wanted to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing. We've got the NBA and NHL playoffs going on. They have more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, and even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline remains the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. In between the games, you can head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Orlando, the Magic. Let's talk about what they have to work with. So right now, we are a little over a month away from the draft. They're going to have 4 picks. They can definitely trade up. They can trade out. They can make 4 picks and add 4 rookies. I don't know if there's space for 4 rookies in this lineup, so they may end up making some trades instead of wasting picks. Or maybe they'll just make the picks and stash some players in the G League. Who knows what's going to end up happening. But right now they have picks 16, 25, 46, and 57. And then they don't really have too many extra picks. A lot of, I guess, the ones that they have are in the second round. They do, like Washington, I believe it's Washington will have the rights to swap picks with the Magic. They're not going to finish ahead of the Magic and have a reason to swap. So it's basically normal picks for Orlando moving forward. As far as their roster situation, they have a handful of players that have team options this year. That includes Mo Wagner, brother of Franz Wagner, Gary Harris, Corey Joseph, and Caleb Houston. Franz Wagner's extension kicks in this year, so that's less cap space, as does Jaylen Suggs' extension. And then they still have basically everybody else under contract another year before. They haven't given Paulo an extension, but they will. Another year before that'll kick in. Still have Cole Anthony for another year, potentially 2. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will be entering year 2 of his contract. Jonathan Isaac still has a contract. So most of this team is going to be back next year, barring a trade. And they still, as of right now, have 4 picks that they need to add to this team. So they have things to work with, moves to make. But obviously, most of this team is going to come down to the success of the guys with the superstar upside. That's Paulo Beno and Franz Wagner. And let's talk about Paulo first. Another strong season aside from the absence due to the oblique injury. 25.9 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, 4.8 assists. Obviously still not, maybe not even obviously. Maybe you don't know this. Not a great category league player. just under 2 threes per game, subpar field goal percentage, subpar free throw percentage, plenty of turnovers, not many defensive stats. Phenomenal in points leagues and has the upside to be really good in category leagues. I think that's the part that makes this frustrating, is that maybe not even frustrating is not even the right word, but because he's still young. He'll be 23 shortly after the season starts, but we know he can be better. Maybe not expecting the defensive stats to go up by much. 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. Not expecting much. Him and Franz Wagner are the lead playmakers, so the 3 turnovers expected, probably not going anywhere. But I think it's the efficiency that he can improve. If you're watching this, you can see his listing on NBA.com. 6'10", 250. That's a solid dude, very strong player, and yet shooting 45.2% from the floor, 32% from 3, and shooting 5.9 threes per game, 72.7% from the free throw line on 8.4 attempts. An improved free throw percentage would be great. I think that's something that he's capable of doing. Hopefully, but I'm not expecting him to become an 85% free throw shooter. Hopefully, he can get into the high 70s at some point. But I think part of it is the shots he's shooting, and then part of it is, that's actually, you know what? That's most of it. It's the shots that he's shooting. 6 threes per game at 32%. Could probably dial that back a little bit. I'm not totally critical of shooting threes because I think just being a threat from beyond the arc opens up so much for his game as a driver. But it's not his most efficient shot. So he either needs to get more efficient, which I think that's going to be his goal regardless, or maybe shoot less of them. Obviously, it's basically a different era of basketball, but we saw a season when LeBron and D-Wade were in Miami where they just started the year off just not shooting threes because they were like, you know what, neither of us is phenomenal three-point shooter. We are good at getting to the rim. Let's do that. Not saying Paulo needs to not shoot threes again, but maybe we can look at getting better shots. The 3 players who shot the most threes per game in Orlando. This is a fun stat. Jaylen Suggs shot the most at 6.9 per game, 31.4%. Paulo and Franz each shot 5.9 threes per game. We talked about Paulo shooting 32%. Franz at 29.5%. I know there was a report about Franz saying that the oblique injury, like even though he was healed, it's still bothering his shot, missing of a shot. And I think just watching him in the playoffs, it doesn't take like a keen eye to see that his shot looked a little weird. There's almost like a little hitch in it. Interesting stuff. I think another interesting stat, the player who shoots the most shots from 16 to 24 feet in the NBA, which, if we're talking about analytics, quote unquote, that would emphasize more threes and layups, I think the mid-range shot is still valuable. But I think it takes a level of efficiency for it to make sense and for it to be a truly, I guess, like a go-to shot. But I think it's also a great isolation shot or game on the line shot because it's, I guess, the shot the defense would least expect you to shoot. Coordinating legs, trying to get to the rim, cut that off. Okay, let's get to the mid-range. Okay, let's pump fake a 3, get a mid-range. From 16 to 24 feet, Banchero shot 4.8 shots per game during the playoffs. Made 33.3% of them. That's, one, to see an uptick in mid-range shots per game. He only shot 2.2 during the regular season at 36.6%. And he shot 4.2 mid-range per game at 42.9%. Like, the mid-range shot is again, so it's a shot that it takes a specific player to hit it efficiently. So among the players that shot at least 4.2, we'll just say at least as many mid-range shots as Banchero, he shot the worst percentage at 42.9 from 8 to 16 feet. That is. Embiid, De'Aaron Fox, DeJounte Murray, Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson, Bam Adebayo, Kawhi Leonard all shot more at a higher percentage, but still under 50%. And then players like Jalen Brunson, Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram, DeMar DeRozan, SGA, and KD shot more and shot over 50%. From 16 to 24 feet, I mean, you're talking about DeMar DeRozan as the guy who shoots the most mid-range shots from 16 to 24 feet. Made 44.9% of them. Banchero made 36.6% of those. The only player that shot as many or more mid-range shots from 16 to 24 feet than Paulo and shot a lower percentage. I don't remember exactly what I said there. 35.5% was Paul George. Made 35.5% from 16 to 24 feet. Banchero made 36.6. Being compared to Paul George this past season isn't something we're hoping for. Among players that shot at least 1.5 mid-range per game, Banchero was the worst percentage. The only player that shot at least like one mid-range shot per game and shot worse than other than Paul George, was DeJounte Murray. And he had one of the worst shooting seasons of his career. And then down closer to the players that shot exactly one mid-range shot per game, talking Benedict Mathurin, Caleb Martin, Andrew Wiggins, Pascal Siakam. They shot lower percentages, but shot one per game. There's a reason. All that is to be said is that Paolo Banchero is 6'10", 250, and I think he shoots too many mid-range shots, and I don't think that's a uncommon opinion. And it is a shot that, you can look at the percentages, but you can tell it is a shot he can hit, but it's not the most efficient shot. And I think that's what quote unquote analytics is that, yeah, sure, he can hit that shot, and with the game on the line, if he hits it, you're totally fine with that. And it's probably a good shot with the game on the line if the defense is really packing the paint, running off the 3-point line, getting the mid-range shot, having that shot is valuable, 100%. But there weren't many players that shot as many mid-ranges as Paolo, and shot it as inefficiently as Paolo. That's the issue that we run into here. When there's a Magic Hawks game and George Niang was like, hey man, keep shooting those mid-range shots. We'll see where that gets you. It's he's not wrong with that. So could we see, honestly, the number one thing I want to see is Paolo getting to the rim even more. And that's not to say he didn't. He took 7.5 shots per game from less than 8 feet during the regular season. Let's narrow this down. In the restricted area, trying to figure this. Shot 5.3 shots per game in the restricted area during the regular season. Made 66.1% of those. That's a far more efficient shot than making. This is just NBA.com's definition of the mid-range shot. He made 41.7% of those at 4.7 attempts per game. And then in the paint, non-restricted area shots. Here, we'll do this in case you're watching this and you can see what I'm messing with on NBA.com. So you can see the mid-range shots. So, and if you're listening to this, I'm just going to describe it best as possible. NBA.com's definition of the mid-range. DeMar shot 8.3 per game, made 45.8%. Brandon Ingram 5.6 per game, made 45.5%. So those are the only two players that shot more mid-ranges than Paolo, and they both hit a higher percentage. And then in the paint, non-restricted area, so more or less semi-mid-range shots, still shot 41.3%. Paolo did. He wasn't quite among the leaders. I mean, there's plenty of players that shot more of those. but he was subpar from there. But you can see 66.1% from the paint, from the restricted area, at 5.3 attempts per game. That's up among the leaders, but it's not like top 5 or anything like that. But a lot of those guys either shot similar percentages or some of them even shot better, but a lot of those were bigs that shot better. So Giannis was over 70%, Mark Williams, Anthony Davis, Zubats, Jokic, Mobley, Jalen Johnson, Rudy Gobert, Daniel Gafford, Jalen Duren, Walker Kessler. We're talking about players that made over 70% from the restricted area while shooting as many or more than Paolo, Jared Allen, Jakob Poeltl. The outliers are Jalen Johnson, LeBron James, Christian Brown. Christian Brown's shooting, and Amen Thompson as well. Jaylen Brown shooting just fast break dunks, basically from Jokic. So if we're looking at the shots that we want to see Paolo taking, I'd like to see more in the restricted area. I mean, if you're looking at the screen, you can watch. Number 2 in restricted area shots per game was Zion. Paolo made a higher percentage of shots from the restricted area than Zion Williamson by 2%. Zion took 9.5 per game. Paolo is a better shooter than Zion, so I'm not saying Paolo needs to shoot significantly fewer perimeter shots than Zion, but the emphasis on getting to the rim is what I'd like to see more of from Paolo, and then still having the threat of the mid-range and 3-point shots. So shooting those is still a good thing because it gives you the threat, and then just an improvement in those areas. But those are things that, like, obviously, just as he gets older and continues to work, he will improve. But the emphasis on getting to the rim, I think, opens things up. But it is hard to do that with no perimeter shooting. So now we're here. Okay, here's the problem Orlando needs to solve. We need more spacing for this player who is an incredible driver, incredibly efficient from the restricted area, that has had to settle for mid-range and 3-point shots, and also likes to shoot those shots. Let's be real. It's not just, oh man, I can't get to the rim. I have to shoot the mid-range. It's also like, oh, can't get the rim. Guess I gotta shoot a mid-range. So that happens. That's cool. It's his thing. More of an emphasis on getting to the rim, I think, opens things up for the offense, but partial blame needs to be put on the front office for not adding more shooting. I mean, they added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but they need more. How do they do that? We'll see. They need to make the moves, though. All right, enough about Paolo. Let's talk about Franz Wagner, the other player with all-star upside that probably would have made the all-star game if he didn't have the oblique injury and was on a run to win most improved player, or could have won. I don't know, would he? That's an interesting one. Would Franz Wagner have won most improved player if he not only played enough games, but also played the way he was at the beginning of the season? Were his numbers enough of an improvement? He was the number 8 overall pick, but so was Dyson Daniels. It's interesting. I don't know. We'll never know, but he averaged 24.2 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4.7 assists, over a steal. Field goal percentage still wasn't great. And we talked about the 3-point percentage earlier, second straight season under 30%. Still made 1.7 threes per game as a career high. There's definitely still room for Franz to get better. But when we're talking about fantasy, his best performances were when Paolo was off the floor. We're talking about the Magic as a team. It is not a bad thing to have Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero on the same team. It's very difficult to stop, especially when you add more shooting around them and continue to add. I mean, they're already incredible defensively, but adding more shooting around them opens things up for both of them on offense. They're both good creators. It's a good thing. I don't think we'll ever see Franz hit the ceiling in fantasy that we know he can hit as long as he's sharing the floor with Paulo Banchero. That's not saying I'm not going to be a fantasy player that's like, well, the Magic need to trade Franz, or the Magic need to trade Paulo. You can only have one, blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to see my fantasy players do well. Like, it's not what we're here to do. We're here to say, this is what the best basketball decision is. Here's how we need to react in fantasy because of it. So if they're going to continue to build around these two, that's a good thing. Franz can still be a very good fantasy player. I don't think he's going to hit elite status while sharing the floor. And he, like we talked about earlier in this episode, his extension is set to hit, going to keep him tied to the team for 4 more years. So entering year like age 27 season or age 28, he'll either be up for a new contract or be a free agent. And maybe, this is looking way too far in the future to truly project, but maybe at that point, if things haven't worked out flawlessly, maybe at that point he's even been traded if things don't work out, but at that point maybe he could leave and sign with a different team. This is entire speculation. Like, that could happen. And maybe we see him on a new team as more of a number 1 option as opposed to a 1B option. See him play even better. I don't know what things are going to look like 4 or 5 years from now, but I do know that Franz Wagner is going to be capped playing next to Paulo Beno. Feel pretty confident in that. And again, that's okay from a team perspective because he still was very good at times, even with Paulo in the lineup, but it wasn't as good as what we saw in November, early December before his injury. Nothing like that. He was consistently scoring 30, dishing out dimes at the same time, getting rebounds, hitting doing everything. Part of maybe limited success after he returned was the injury. Part of it is sharing the floor with Paulo. Would love to see him prove me wrong this upcoming season, but I think I have to. It's one of those situations where, yes, and if I'm doing dynasty rankings, I could say, okay, Franz Wagner, the individual, should be top 25, top 20. With the situation, the fact that him and Paulo are sharing the floor, I got to bump him down a few spots because even if the situation changes, I'm not, that's a low, or if the situation changes, that is a low, I guess, chance of that happening to the point where Franz is going to be able to capitalize on the upside that he has. So the likely scenario that happens, probably like a 90% chance, is that Franz Wagner shares the floor with Paulo Beno for the next 4 to 5 years. That limits what he can do, even if I know that he is talented enough to be better than that. Situations change quickly, though. I'll always say that. All right, let's talk about what the rest of this Magic roster looks like, because they do have a number of different pieces that have upside, but maybe not as exciting as they were a couple of years ago. It's the difference in the phase of we're early in the rebuild. Maybe this player can be as good as this player, or this player is going to turn out to be like this all-star level player. Everybody, it's the unknown, the possibilities, it could be, anything could be in this box. It could even be a boat kind of thing. Or like, to fully lay it out, hopefully you got the reference, but you could have this boat or you could have this box. This box could be anything. It could even be a boat. It's like, what could it be? I don't know. But now that we kind of know what these players look like a little bit more, it's not quite as exciting. It's more like, oh, okay, you need to figure this thing out. You need to be what we thought you could be, or you got to go and we want someone else in here. I think Jaylen Suggs is pretty safely the 3rd best player on this team, 3rd most valuable asset in fantasy. We just need him to be healthier than he was this past season. The continued improvement as a shooter is great. Hit 2 threes a game for the 2nd straight season. Played 75 games 2 years ago. Outside of that, so far in his career, he's played 48, 53, 75, and then 35 games. This past season averaged 16.2 points, 4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.5 steals, almost a block, 2.2 threes, all those career highs. Field goal percentage is back down, shot 41% after shooting 47.1% the year before, but everything else is improved. Top 109 cat leagues. Basically, if he's healthy, he's going to continue to be really solid 3 and D player, but that kind of undersells what he does. He's an incredible defender. He's not quite as heavy on the ball because Franz and Paulo are the main creators, but still enough on the ball to get some assists. He also hasn't played 30 minutes per game in a season yet. So maybe we can see that and see some numbers improve in that regard, but health is kind of the main thing for him. I think that what he provides is really valuable in category leagues, and he fits well with Franz and Paulo. You just gotta, the better he gets as a shooter, the better his thing is gonna work because he can continue to be an elite perimeter defender. And if he can space the floor, just continue to get better at that, then things work out well for the team. I mean, we talked about it earlier. He hit 2.2 per game, but was shooting just above 30%. So if he can get to the point where he's, with the amount he's shooting, if he's making closer to 37, 38%, that's closer to 3 threes per game. Not quite, but closer. That's good for fantasy. That's good for spacing for Orlando. We just need to see that type of progression from him or have someone else in there that can in the starting lineup. But we'll see. I'm pretty confident that Suggs is going to continue to start, and any sort of improvement will just help. But we really do need him to be healthier than he was this year and than he has been the last, or for most of his career, outside of one season. Anthony Black, former number 6 overall pick, was exciting coming out of college, and it was mostly just because of the amount of steals that he got. I mean, there was other things to be excited about, but the steals that he was able to get in college, the steal rate was insanely high, which made him an attractive fantasy option. Averaged half a steal per game as a rookie and only 1.1 this past season. I think if we're looking at players that could be, I don't remember when I said this or where I said it, but the quote unquote next Dyson Daniels, I don't think that anybody's going to have that type of leap, but Anthony Black does kind of project to have the same stat set, same type of production. Inefficient field goal percentage, steals upside, playmaking upside, big guard, so he can hopefully get some rebounds, 3 per game in 23.8 minutes. So could we see Anthony Black, if he were to get an extra 10 minutes per game and get up to 34 minutes like Dyson Daniels was at this season, could we see him get to 14 points, 6 rebounds, 4 or 5 assists, almost 2 steals, a block per game? Could we see something like that type of jump? Sure. Is that going to work in Orlando where they're needing a floor spacing guard? Probably not. So I think it's going to prevent him from having any sort of massive leap with the way this team is set up. They really need to add shooting, and Anthony Black doesn't fill that. Could they trade Anthony Black in some sort of package to bring in a more legitimate shooting option? They could. I think I'm trying, not sure exactly what that looks like. We can try and look at a few teams here to see if there's anybody that would make sense, but I'm not really thinking of anybody where a shooting. Okay, well, Anthony Simons, I remember talking about him with the Portland episode. So maybe Anthony Black in some sort of package for Anthony Simons. But then in Portland, not really sure if he gets that same opportunity there either with the amount of talent that they have. So it's interesting. I think that the talent is there, and I think he's a player to stash and continue to hang on to. Former number 6 overall pick, like I said, just waiting on his opportunity to break out. I don't really see the path to that happening this year, though, unfortunately, but we're just going to keep holding out hope that Anthony Black will eventually get that opportunity. Okay. Some of the other guys on this team, the center spot is weird. I think it's something that clearly needs to be upgraded because they've had this trio the last 2 years. Wendell Carter, Mo Wagner, and Goga Batadze, all having strong stretches at times, all having different strengths. It's an interesting method, but I think where they get this, I don't really know, but the floor spacing big is something that they need. A good shooter, but also somebody that can still defend and rebound. Because I think the issue you run into is, okay, Wendell Carter and Mo Wagner can space the floor, but neither is as good defensively as Goga Batadze. None of these guys are dominant rebounders, have had stretches, but not dominant. So trying to make it all work in it with what they had, I think it worked okay. But I think I'd like to see them truly figure out the center position. I think that, along with adding more spacing, they kind of go hand in hand. And they're both important to the future of this team. But I don't feel confident in any of them being super valuable in dynasty leagues. If I were to pick one, I would say Wendell Carter, simply because he's had the most opportunity. It's like kind of widely regarded as the best center, or I guess not widely regarded, but like kind of the reputation of it. And he was the most recent starter, but Batadze's stretch this past season was also very strong. I don't feel great about any of them. Tristan Da Silva, guy they drafted this past season, I think he's more of a solid role player than a really good fantasy player. I think he had some stretches this year because of the injuries, but he was drafted as an older rookie to be ready to come in and play a role. Saw more of an opportunity than they were probably expecting him to as a rookie, but I'm not confident that he's got superstar upside or anything like that. Jonathan Isaac, we know what he is. He's a fantasy stud with more injury issues and limitations than anybody else in the NBA. Hopefully, we'd love to see him stay healthy. He can wreak havoc defensively when he is and still space the floor. But we need to not too confident that he's ever going to get to that point where he's just super healthy all the time, and it'll always be somewhat limited. So, and then some of the other younger upside guys, Jet Howard, former lottery pick. I get the idea of what he was, and I was a little excited about him when he was drafted, but hasn't been great so far. I don't think that there's a massive commitment to making sure that he's an important piece of the future, because I don't think he's shown enough to deserve that. I guess still has the upside to be a really good shooter, but even then, what does a really good fantasy season look like for Jet Howard? I think if he becomes the shooter that they, I guess, drafted him intending for him to be, then he can hit 3 threes per game, 4 threes per game. That's an insane season, but is he even good enough defensively for that to make sense for them to give him that opportunity? Because they pride themselves on their defense. Is he good enough to fit into the rotation to get the opportunity to make 3 threes per game? Not optimistic at this point. Caleb Houston's another young guy with some upside. Has had some shooting flashes, but not super optimistic about him either. They do have, and I think that what's the intriguing part is so many players that are former first-round picks, former lottery picks, honestly. I didn't even mention Cole Anthony, who really good sixth man, I think. Interesting in fantasy. Has some really good games and then follows it up with really poor shooting nights. The field goal percentage is never going to be great, but he's a good rebounder for a small guard. Just a very unique skill set, and I think is a really good reserve, but not a player you want as a starter. But Orlando has all these pieces I mentioned, and they have 4 picks this year. They have ammo to make moves. Will they fully commit to that and say, "Oh no, we're not just going to give this another year to see who develops. We're going to take action," which is what management oftentimes needs to do. Some sort of action. How do we package 4 picks this year with certain young players on our roster to maybe bring in players that are ready to help this team built around Paulo Beno and Franz Wagner win now? How do the Magic do that? We'll see what types of moves they can make. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at NoahRubin22. You can like, subscribe, comment if you feel like you liked it. Then let me know. That would be very helpful. But that's going to do it for this episode, and I will see you guys next time.